Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little different. I honestly didn't intend to speak on this. I try to keep things kind of light and informative on my channel, but it was something that I felt warranted a discussion. I re-entered the workforce sometime last year. Recently, I found myself having a conversation with one of my coworkers, and I was telling them about my kids, that, I had two boys who were on the spectrum. People, when they hear that you have children who are autistic, they kind of try to relate to you. And that's what this person did. He was telling me about a cousin of his who worked with people on the spectrum. And this cousin was very well respected in his field because he got results. It started going into how the cousin got these results. He framed it as the tough love approach. So this was, I'm assuming, sometime in the 60s or 70s. This is an older coworker that I'm speaking to here. And he has said that his cousin had since passed away. So I'm putting the time frame at around the 60s or the 70s. The cousin would work with kids as well as adults with autism. And he was saying that there was this one kid who was 20 years old, but was still had the mindset of a child. And he would frequently use the bathroom on himself. His cousin's approach to, or resolution, was to put this person into a tub full of ice water. I'm not sure how that correlates to him using the bathroom, but according to my coworker, the child slash adult never used the bathroom on himself again. These were the results that were, praised in this person's field. Another child that he was working with, who was under the age of 18, would throw up when, quote unquote, he didn't get his way or didn't get something that he wanted. He would throw up on the other kids. To my knowledge, I do not know of any person who can just throw up on cue like this. Usually you have to stick your finger down your throat or do something to activate a gag reflex. I just don't know of anybody who can just do that on cue like that. But, I may be wrong, but I just don't see that being, a reality. Their solution was to put all the other kids in the classroom in ponchos. And when this person would throw up on them, he would hose them off and go about the day. There was never a point where the individual's needs were addressed. I'm assuming that this child was nonverbal, because nonverbal kids, they tend to communicate in other ways. But it just never occurred to this person that this child is in need of something. It was just the assumption that, oh, he's just doing this to be difficult. So this child's needs were never met, from what I got from this story. And the educator was praised because they were able to go about the day without, their workday being disrupted by this child. By today's standards, this is blatant abuse, like plain and simple. They justify it as, the ends justifying the means. He got results, so it didn't matter how he went about doing it. I was horrified by this conversation with my coworker. I had not disclosed my, autism to him at this point. And I don't know if that would have made a difference or not, but the whole conversation just made me very uncomfortable. And it also got me thinking of this whole ends justifying the means thing. I posted a video a week ago, probably, maybe longer, about how I desensitized my youngest son to his ears being touched so that I can clean his ears. And someone commented this on the post. Now, there's a lot that can be taken from this and a lot to be upset about. The implication that I am somehow contributing to children being sexually abused, but also the complete disregard for the work that is done and the time that is put into being considerate of my child during the learning process. Creating a safe environment and just making sure that I went slow with this so that he was not overstimulated. There are, terrible people out here who do abuse children and people with disabilities. That fault is solely on that person and not anyone else's. It's not the child, it's not the parent. It is solely on that individual who chose to abuse a child or a person with disabilities. This is no different from saying that if a woman dresses, more conservative, that she is less likely to be raped. That's not how that works. I understood, when I created this channel that I was opening my life up to people on the internet, and understand that we also live in a time of hot takes where people are reacting to situations that, while possible, are not always probable. Like I said, I was already thinking about the whole topic of ends justifying the means from my conversation with my coworker. So I went to the internet and I admittedly went down a rabbit hole, and I found this article that discusses ABA therapy and how this therapy that was once renowned for helping people on the spectrum do everyday things on their own, how it got this, very negative reputation. So in the article, there is this man who is autistic, and he had been receiving ABA therapy since he was in elementary school, first grade, I believe. So he talks about the daily humiliation that he had to suffer because of ABA, where they would give his progress reports in front of the class. He would get these smiley faces or frowny faces, and those little stickers dictated his life. He was so traumatized by, getting a sticker, and had built up so much anxiety around it, of doing a good job and suppressing his natural instincts, which were, to get up and move around when he needed to, to stem, or if he would read during, I guess, a lesson, because reading helped him to focus, he would get reprimanded for that. So all of these natural instincts of his, he was being told were wrong. And it had a lasting effect on him. Low self-esteem and compound PTSD. He was essentially just always nervous about disappointing others. That is what I hear a lot with ABA therapy, is that it indirectly encourages autistic people to mask. It goes on the article to give an update that this man is now working as a software engineer. He travels the world, he lives independently, and one of the things that he emphasized is the freedom of it all is what he values most, and not having a handler, not having someone always looking over and critiquing his every move. Article also interviews a therapist who says that the fact that this man can hold a job and live on his own and can speak on issues like autonomy is an indicator that he didn't need ABA therapy to begin with. ABA therapy is for people with profound autism who need these things in order to do the most basic things in life. A little background on me: I was raised in the 90s. And I did get the occasional whooping. My mom would hit me on the butt with a belt. She would never hit me anywhere else on my body, always on my bottom, and she just never hit me in front of other people. And I took that as her being considerate of my feelings, not wanting to humiliate me, but to discipline me. And I remember my mom, she would get criticized by family members saying that she was too soft on me because she didn't whoop me enough, or I didn't look, devastated when I came out of the room from getting whoopings and stuff like that. And that's the thing, is it just feels like as a parent, we are always getting told by family or by complete strangers that we are not doing a good enough job of raising our kids, particularly when it comes to discipline. I remember Zai, when he was younger, someone, a family member, telling me, well, you're gonna have to whoop this one, because if not, he gonna run all over you. Mind you, I was maybe 2 months, if that, at that time. But she had already decided that he was too headstrong. Going back to the article, because, that was really the whole purpose of this video. There was this mom who had a child on the spectrum, and she was very much against ABA therapy. She's like, autism is not a disease. It doesn't need a cure. They don't need to be, changed or fixed in any way. And she described ABA therapy as conversion therapy for people with autism. Her reasonings were saying that ABA therapy, it encourages compliance. You have a goal in mind for this child, be it making eye contact or sitting still in like a chair for a certain amount of time. And this person has to do it, otherwise they will lose something that they particularly care about, like taking away a toy until they complete the task. And what she's saying is this is forcing compliance, but not only that, it is also teaching your child that they have to do whatever an adult tells them to do, which opens the door for abuse. Now, I think going back to, the person who commented on my video, this is essentially mirroring what this person was trying to say as well. And again, I have to reiterate that any person who chooses to abuse a child or anyone else, the responsibility or the punishment should lie on that person, not on the child, not on, the environment, their educational environment. Let's look at it as you would for a neurotypical child. Say my children did not have autism and they were in a school setting. There would be no difference. They would still have everyday tasks that they needed to complete, that an adult was telling them that they needed to complete. And if they didn't do those things, there would be repercussions. So detention, going to the principal's office, having a phone call placed to your parents, or, not being able to go out for recess, silent lunch. I think they still do all those things in the school system. There is no difference for when you have a child on the spectrum. You are setting boundaries and providing rewards for certain situations and consequences for certain actions. And the alternative is you not setting any boundaries for your child and them growing up to be an adult who does not understand boundaries. So there was another person in the article, her name was Dr. King. She was a behavioral analyst, and she was talking about how she is at odds with a coworker of hers who's a dietitian, because Dr. King, when doing feeding therapy with kids, she will offer a reward if they take a bite of a non-preferred food. The dietitian is strictly opposed to this. Offering rewards for eating, she says, creates a negative association in the mind with food, and that can lead to overeating and eventually possibly a full-blown eating disorder. Dr. King's stance is, why not provide some sort of reward? They are doing something that is major. Taking a bite of a non-preferred food when you are a child on the spectrum who has difficulties eating or, problem feeders. The alternative is that this child will go on to be severely malnourished because they're not eating the foods that they need to eat. Or they have to undergo surgery to have a tube inserted, a feeding tube. That, for me, really places all of this into perspective. These are the odds that we are up against as parents and people with profound autism. It's not simply that we can ignore these things and the child will, develop fine and they'll be okay. It is, if we ignore this, this could have major life consequences for this individual. Zai, he went through a feeding program, and when he was 4 years old. And at the time, Zai was losing his eyesight because he was that malnourished, because he would only eat chips. So yes, the 2 months in the feeding program was difficult. He did cry. He was uncomfortable at times. But that was all for the purpose of him eventually getting to a place where he is eating healthy. But some people will have you believe that this is a form of abuse because your child is on the spectrum. And you should not be, trying to change them in any way. So for Zai, the feeding therapy was a necessary therapy for him. This is another thing that we come across in the autistic community, is that some people take offense to the term profound autism or these labels of high functioning, Asperger's. They feel like it creates this hierarchy that places, people with high functioning autism up here and people with profound autism down here. Like they say that high functioning implies that people on the other end of the spectrum are low functioning. That is more of something that, people who probably don't really understand autism have built up this prestige around the terms. But the purpose for these is to categorize autism because it is a spectrum and it is broad. You have to have some sort of categorization so that you can recommend the proper therapies for these individuals, so that an individual like the young man that I was speaking of earlier does not end up in a situation that does not benefit him, being in ABA therapy when he doesn't need to be. Diagnoses don't typically use words like high functioning or Asperger's. That is more of a societal term. These are the levels you'll typically see in an official autism diagnosis. So we have 3 people who are diagnosed with autism. There is myself and my 2 sons. My youngest son has received ABA therapy, feeding therapy, occupational therapy, as well as speech therapy. He is categorized as, I believe, level 3 autism. And he very much needed every one of these therapies in order to get to a place where he can do for himself. My oldest son has only received speech therapy. He didn't need occupational or behavioral, any of those things. He just needed help with building his vocabulary bank. And then you have me. I have never had any type of therapies, even though I could have benefited from speech therapy, because as a child and even still as an adult, I have trouble communicating verbally, especially when it comes to labeling emotions. So that's my, my rant. Like I said, I wasn't really intending to make this type of video today, but it was just something that I felt needed to be discussed. And I am very much interested to hear how you all feel about this. The article, I'll post it in my description if you care to read it, and comment, share it, have conversation, because I feel like it is something that we as a society could benefit from, discussing a bit. But anyway, I will see you all in my next video.